Welcome back, everybody. We love to I'm Sheila again, the director, and we always love to kick off these panel discussions with each of the panelists briefly introducing themselves and then sharing a takeaway, something that resonated with them from the film. So, Tally, would you like to kick us off?
Of course. Hi. First of all, I'm never speechless if you know me, but I have to say this was one of the most beautiful, most compelling films that tells the most remarkable story of a family and of things that people are going through right now. So thank you, Sheila, thank you, Maureen and Matt. I don't even have the words to say, and every time I get so choked up, but you are some of the most incredible people I know. So thank you. Again, I'm Tally Dolge. I'm the CEO of Jewish Family Service in San Antonio. We provide mental health care, social services, and senior services to anyone in need. I'm also grateful and so proud to be a member of the San Antonio Mobile Mental Wellness Collaborative, where we actually provide and bring community and mental health resources from 6 organizations directly into the schools. And I'm hoping that this will continue and we'll be able to bring that into all the schools. But thank you so much for allowing me to be here today.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. Kennedy, would you like to introduce yourself and share a little takeaway?
Awesome. Yes. My name is Kennedy Edwards. I am a junior political science major at Howard University in Washington, D.C. I came across Mr. and Mrs. Molak just this past summer and learning more about David's Legacy Foundation. And how I got into this was by my former title of Miss Texas Teen USA. And so, being someone who has grown up in the times of the internet and social media and everything surrounding that, I'm very familiar with cyberbullying as well with traditional bullying, and just recognizing the fact that, bullying doesn't always seem how we think it's going to look like. It's not always in a traditional form, and it can be completely different across so many different spectrums. But from the film, I just really enjoyed, not only watching these compelling stories, but the information and the takeaways that you can gain from this film, understanding that being a bystander is obviously not a good thing, but there are different steps that we can take to overcome this.
Beautiful. Thank you. Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Peterson. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I'm at Texas State University in the Texas School Safety Center. And one of the things that I took away, in addition to what you were saying, Tali, is the power that we have as individuals to harm other people or to intervene and lift up other people. And if we're witnessing something, how to step up and the difference that it can make when we do step up and intervene. And I think having those difficult conversations are necessary with our kids about what's going on in their lives and how to be an upstander. So that's what I took away from this.
Thank you. Jamie.
Yes, thank you for having me. And I want to second the comments that Tally shared with the participants of today's program on your film and the stories and the information that you shared. Very impactful, very informative. And I don't think anybody who watched it will walk away without being impacted in a positive way. So thank you for that. My name is Jamie Kigundu. I'm an attorney in Houston, Texas. I've been practicing 15 years, had several national cases, and I have used my platform and my love for social advocacy to share information on this topic in particular. So I travel the country and the state and participate in various forms of media and schools sessions to talk about David's Law and the impact there. I also am a spokesman for Crime Stoppers. So I know there's a lot of questions about where people can get additional information. And so Crime Stoppers has a tip line, 713-222-TIPS. If you're a family or a person struggling with questions, that's another resource for you to consider. And I'm a parent. So seeing the impact that this new digital world has on the youth is an issue that speaks to me personally. And I think all of us who have loved ones that are in our care, whether you're a parent or not, has a similar feeling of responsibility and interest in learning more. So I was impacted by hearing about self-bullying, something I don't think about when I think about bullying, but oftentimes we are our own worst critics. And so I think that was very informative to point that out. The story about the young lady who had a criteria for a certain amount of likes in order to find acceptance, that was new to me and shocking as well. And I appreciated the conversation about mindfulness, meditation, things of that nature. So thank you, and I look forward to the rest of this panel.
Thank you. Dr. Jeff?
Hi there. Thank you for having me. This was the first time I've seen this film. Very powerful. I'm a psychologist. I'm the clinical director at Clarity Child Guidance Center here in San Antonio. It's a freestanding, private, not-for-profit children's psychiatric hospital. I think we're different in a couple of ways in that we really take a developmental focus and also a family and a systems focus, because we know kids' challenges don't, exist in a vacuum, and we don't just look at kids and try to understand what's wrong with that kid. What's going on in the larger picture compared also to their individual differences. And one of the things that we know from some work we've done in our outpatient is about 40% of people or families who bring their kids to us, when we ask them, how confident on a scale of 0 to 3 are you that you know what services your kid needs? 40% say 0. So they work through the system to get to us. They're in my office and they have no idea what they need. So that's the mystery of mental health. Takeaways, what to me was a really powerful combination I hadn't thought of in tandem before, was this peer status, the need for peer status, which is sort of drives an impulse to harm in order to gain status and a sense of control and power, alongside the bystander effect. It's like a double whammy. And I hadn't thought of it that way before. So thanks, Sheila, for bringing that to us.
That is a powerful one. I forgot about that one too, and I learned that. Maureen, would you like to go next?
Thanks, Sheila. I've watched it, I don't know, maybe a dozen times, and it never gets any easier for me to see the pain and the anguish of my sons, as well as David's friends, and my husband. I think my takeaway this time was looking at David's friends and looking at all of the kids that spoke up in the film. Those kids are taking a risk, and that takes courage to do that. And those kids are the upstanders of this film. And so being able to celebrate them and thank them for bringing their story out in the open and sharing this with the world is going to really make a difference in other young people's lives.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And modeling it for all those that watch it. I mean, that has been really great feedback in the film, is the kids that say, I'm that kid, or, and being able to express it. Matt?
Hi, Sheila. Yes, I think that this time I really pay close attention to the variety of different programs that were highlighted in the film, and whether it's a solution through technology, or whether it's an in-school program or a parent program, they're all kind of coming at this issue from a different angle. And I just think that kind of highlights that it is a very complex problem, and that's what it's going to take. It's going to take continuous contact and attacks from different angles. Otherwise, it's not going to get any better.
Yeah, and a lot of different approaches, a lot of different programs for the different communities. Okay, we've got a lot of questions. I want to ask a few of the panelists first. We'll want to keep our answers a little short because we have 12 open questions here, which are all amazing. I want to start, Tally. Can you just talk about like that Cigna study and how for the first time ever, the 25-year-old and under cohort is the loneliest on the planet, and yet they're the most connected, you know, technology.
Well, exactly. They're the most connected virtually with this. But there are 4 main reasons why they may be the loneliest on this planet. I have done a lot of research on this, but of course, one is they're feeling connected or disconnected through social media. I think one of the big things that we look at is we think our connections on social media may be our friendships or the way we get our news or what happens during the day. That is not connection. That actually is a form of disconnection because you're not really looking at the way we communicate. This is not a way that our brains are supposed to communicate. This is not the way we as humans are supposed to communicate. So again, social media and the disconnection and connection. And of course, this is a new way of communicating, and they aren't learning the skills that maybe I did in my 40s that they're learning, you know, they're not learning, I'm sorry, at a much younger age. So they're not getting those skill set. That's a very hard thing. Then they're not seeking help. They're ashamed. There could be a stigma attached to saying, I need something. I need to get some mental health care right now, or I don't feel right, or I'm anxious about this. So that's another piece to this. And then, of course, I don't know if you know, but since COVID has hit, 1 in 4 people under the age of 25 no longer have a job. So they're unemployed. And that was their form of communication, of getting together, of being one-on-one and in person. I mean, I think one of the beautiful things about this film that you've shown is the connection and needing to be near people. And what COVID has shown that we can't do that. So we need to find other ways of communicating and figuring out how to talk to one another and get that same kind of human touch, which we're not getting at all. So that's what's happening right now. And I think, you know, I think we always think that our senior population are our most lonely and vulnerable. That is not the case anymore. Again, keep that in mind, especially if you do have younger adults in your life, and try to communicate in another way and ask questions. Whether you have to spend some time, you know, on Zoom and have this kind of a conversation, whatever it is, but connect. That's what I have to say.
Thank you. Stephanie, could you just address, like, maybe list a few symptoms or sort of behaviors that we might see in a child that's, you know, experiencing bullying either at school or at home?
Yeah, so first of all, just to elaborate on what the film had talked about, the most important thing is to have these conversations with our kids. A great time to do it is when you're driving with them to go pick up dinner, something like that, and not in an investigatory manner, but just conversational. Having questions about how they use social media, what their friends like to use. Do they use social media to vent? Have they ever witnessed cyberbullying or bullying, and what did they do about it? If they witnessed it, would they feel comfortable coming to you? If they experienced it, who would they go talk to? And having these conversations on a regular basis. And then some of the things to pay attention to are looking for a change in your child's behavior or in your student's behavior. What is the norm for that child? And then paying attention to those changes, following up on those changes. Are they a little bit more quiet than usual? Are they getting angrier quicker, more irritated? Are they, is there a change in their behavior at school? Are they refusing to go to school, or their grades are declining? And I know with COVID, it's hard to tell because there's a lot of other changes going on. But I would look at, like, after they go online, are they more sad or more secretive in their behavior? So paying attention to your child's verbal behavior as well as their nonverbal behavior, noticing those changes, following up with them about those changes, having those conversations.
Yeah. it's such a tough time because there's also hormones. I mean, it just, and all the stuff that's going on in the world. Dr. Jeff, so parents of kids who are bullying, what advice do you have for them? You know, some of them will, you know, take away their kids' devices. Others will go, sorry, parents of kids who are being bullied. That's actually the question. Some parents will actually kind of go and approach the other parents of the kid, and sometimes schools get involved. But what's your advice for parents whose child is being bullied?
Well, it's to try to understand what's happening and what it means to the kid. And there's so many variables, you know, it depends to a certain extent. Maureen and I talked about this a little bit. It depends, you know, is the kid reaching out to their parents? If they are, to me, that's a good sign. So it depends a lot on how we find out and those sort of things. But if there's a change, like Stephanie was saying, if there's a change that we're concerned about, then I think it becomes a problem-solving investigation kind of thing where we're working with the kid. And I may, you know, say to my kid, I'm not sure what to do here. And I would like for us to get some input and some help from someone else. And someone who knows some things about this. I always recommend, I do evaluations of kids, and even when I'm referring for therapy, so here's a word for people to write down: consultation, mental health consultation. People a lot of times don't want to approach mental health because they don't know what kind of commitment it's requiring or what's going to be expected or what's going to happen. So even when I refer for therapy, I tell people, when you go to the therapist, when you approach a therapist, tell them you're looking for a consultation. You go, tell them your story, let your kid tell them their story, and then you listen to what they have to say. If it feels like a fit and you're going to get something from that, then do whatever feels right with that. If not, then go to the next person. And you know, there's things that we look for as professionals that we can help parents with that maybe they're not thinking about. And so we have a whole list of things that we look at in terms of development and other things. In terms of who do you reach out to, that's a big mystery for a lot of folks too. One option is to check with your local county psychological association. Call them, email them, and say, hey, I'm kind of confused with this situation with my kid now. Do you know someone y'all have someone who works with kids and specializes with kids and families? Can you provide some referrals so we can, and then we call and we talk. If it sounds good, then maybe we go see them. There's also, you can Google local or maybe county or community mental health source, mental health resources to find someone like that. There's concerns also about expense. To see a private psychologist, for example, can cost $150, $175. For a lot of people, that's a lot of money. Well, looking at the Molac situation, and they were taking steps and doing everything that they could with this, but it tells you there's a lot at stake, and it may be that I need to put on my Visa card, you know, $150 charge and pay it off over the next year or something, but I need to get some help. If I don't understand what's going on, I want to talk with someone who does, that I have confidence in.
Thank you. Matt, can I ask you a quick question? Not a quick one, but so you could have done a lot of things after David died, but you chose to advocate for stronger legislation. What made you choose that strategy? What got you to that point? And you're muted.
Okay. Yeah, it wasn't a really a path or decision that we were thinking about right away. It was, you know, after losing David, we were just focusing on breathing and just barely functioning. But but I do remember, like I said in the film, within hours, that wanted to do something to honor David. And when I got home, Cliff had written that post that I wasn't aware of, and he talked about David's legacy. There were also classmates of Cliff, our oldest son. His med school class started a GoFundMe for anti-bullying, and then through that post that Cliff made, there was that went shared thousands of times. We were contacted by Senator Menendez, local legislator, who talked about the legislation. And so there's really a lot of things happening, a lot of things happening at the same time, a lot of people coming into our lives and ideas. And so we started working on the legislation and created the foundation, and it just kind of took off from there. But so it wasn't just like an immediate decision that that's what we need to do. It's just the path that we took right after losing David. Now your mute's on.
I know. And thank God you did, because it's helping so many people and people in other states and other countries to be inspired to change their own laws. Maureen, there's a question here. If you could talk a little bit about how David's Law has impacted Texas, but also the positive response that you've seen in the schools with regards to bullying.
Yeah, so, David's Law has been into effect, a little bit over 2 years now. And we've just seen, this prior to COVID, right? Things are so different now, but prior to COVID, schools were implementing David's Law. They had processes in place. There were anonymous tip lines in every school. That's part of David's Law. I mean, we were really seeing a lot of positive outcomes from the passing of this law. And, we're excited to be able to say that since David's Law passed, bullying and cyberbullying has decreased in Texas 4.5% and 2.5% respectively. Even to the point where the CDC called out Texas as that was a really dramatic drop. So we're super, super excited about that. So we know that it matters. Laws matter, and it really creates a framework for us to be able to have conversations like we're having right now.
Thank you. And we're going to talk more a little bit about David's legacy as well. I want to make sure I get to all the panelists. Jamie, what are the 4 most important things we should know about David's Law?
I had to unmute. So certainly there's lots of things that are important about David's Law. I'll run through several of them. So David's Law expands the application of what the definition of bullying is under the Texas Education Code to include cyberbullying as a term. It was not previously something that was in the code, and therefore the policing of bullying activities could not take place from the school's perspective. It empowers schools to punish aggressors for activities that they initiate when they are off campus. So, from home or parties or any of those places that they send communications, the school can now reach out and punish those persons. As Maureen referenced, it allows anonymous reporting to take place. And that is a way for somebody who observes bullying, or even possibly a victim, to report to the school what is transpiring without saying their name, removing the fear of retaliation that person who's witnessing may have. So that's a very positive thing. It allows a victim and the victim's family to seek injunctions from courts, which is a way of restraining the behavior of the aggressor, and of restraining or mandating behavior of the parents of the aggressor to do and take certain activities or to cease certain activities. And also there's a criminal aspect, right? So there's misdemeanor penalties, monetary fines, jail time, depending on the type of communications that are being issued and the ages of the persons that are involved. So I can go on and on for a while, but those are some of the more important things, thanks to David's Law, that now exist in Texas and in multiple jurisdictions that have similar laws now to David's Law.
Awesome, thank you. Kennedy, could you just talk a little bit about, like just influencing young people to become leaders? How can we encourage a bystander to become an upstander, like in the safest way? And that, that courage is, makes us stronger, and it's not always easy to come by, but we can tap into it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Courage is not easy to come by, especially when you're in high school or when you're in grade school and period. You're so focused on fitting in and doing whatever you need to do to achieve that goal. And it comes with, how we're socialized as people. We're socialized to believe that we're supposed to fit into a specific group and that we need to do whatever we need to do to make that happen. So I think that's what happens with a lot of bullying, is that, we try to exclude people and make them feel like they don't fit in. But as you were saying, like, how do we make bystanders become upstanders? I think it comes with communication and making sure that we all understand what our silence does. We talk about this, especially, I study political science. So we talk about it when we talk about like advocating for issues. You cannot be silent about an issue because then you're implicit in the problem. Same thing goes for bullying. If you're silent about the aggression and the harm that's taking place right in front of you, you are complicit in that issue. And by letting people know that, especially young people, like while you may not be the bully, you are still helping them bully by not saying anything. I think that resonates with someone. And, from there, they're able to, comprehend their inactions. And then from there, try to do something to be more active and to not be complicit in the act. As for courage, I would say that, we have to explain to people that, courage comes from loving yourself and knowing what you're capable of and who you are. So the more courage that we have, the less we want to harm other people. And, and the more empowered we feel to help those out who are not as, self-confident. So I think by, teaching people to love themselves first, we can take away the insecurities that most people have that cause them to bully, while also making sure that they are well equipped to empower others along the way.
Sounds so simple, doesn't it? Like it's just, and it's free, but it's just it's not easy.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. We have a question here that's been upvoted quite a bit, and I love this question. So first of all, Jalen Garcia says, I can't thank the Molak family enough for their hard work getting David's Law passed in order to help other kids like my daughter. Without this legislation and the efforts from DBM Project, she would not have gotten relief from the bullying. Now she can focus on the healing. And she's asking, what are ways that we can get involved with the foundation?
Well, I'll answer that one. We are always looking for volunteers at David's Legacy Foundation, and we would just love for anybody to reach out to us and partner with us, and we'll get plugged in because we love our volunteers.
Also from Jalen Garcia, which is, how does David's Legacy Foundation help those that are being bullied continuously?
Yeah, I can try that one.
Okay.
Want me to go?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the, and I guess you mentioned the DBM project, and that's something that that was mentioned. I don't know if one of the attorneys or two of the attorneys were in the film that came to us shortly after losing David, and we didn't really know them, but they had an idea that to try to come up with a solution using civil remedy, whatever is in the civil law to address this. And so they wanted to provide pro bono legal services for families whose kids were being attacked and targeted. And so they were going to create their own entity. We rolled that into the foundation, and so that's an example of a couple of really solid upstanders right there, because they've corralled several other lawyers, and they've expanded it to El Paso, and so they've been able to help families, and a lot of times it never gets to the courthouse, just maybe a call from the attorney or a demand letter or cease and desist letter or something like that. They did have one case recently where an injunction was restraint permanent or temporary injunction was signed, but usually not necessary to stop the problem. And I think one of the other things that David's Legacy does is we get a lot of these calls, and a lot of these calls, they might not necessarily want to take legal action, but they're wanting somebody to talk to listen to them, to understand how to advocate for their child with their school, or how to deal with the other people involved and how to deal with their child. And so a lot of times Maureen will take these calls or somebody from the office, and it's a lot of effort, it's a lot of time, but it's really neat to see these families that are helped, and there's so many of them that are helped that way that it really never gets to the attorneys. And so
that's key, if we can be like not have to have it go that far.
sure.
There's a great question here up for anyone who wants to answer it. My son is an upstander, and he asked the other day how he should stand up against a bully on the bus, especially when the bully doesn't stand down, but escalates. He doesn't want to be punished for being the upstander and getting in a scuffle or altercation in the name of protecting himself or another student. It's a great question. Any advice?
I would consider involving the people who are responsible, the adults, the authorities who are responsible for managing that behavior. And if that's not successful, then bring his own authorities to do the same.
But if it's on a bus, right, he's just like, should he not be an upstander on the bus? Should he tell the bus driver? Like, it's a tough one. Or tell a grown-up is what you're saying?
Well, and it depends on the situation and the amount of risk that kid perceives for themselves. And it could be that it's a stepwise thing where they say, look, what you're doing is not right, and I want you to stop. And if you don't, I'm going to have to find some other way to deal with it. And again, it depends on that kid's perceived risk. If they're at risk of being targeted, they have to, they have to weigh whether they can actually deal with the situation completely or if they need help, I think.
Well, and I'd like to add too that it depends on personalities too, because some personalities may feel very comfortable with direct intervention. So there's direct intervention, like, hey, quit picking on my friend. But there's also indirect intervention. Telling somebody is a way of being an upstander. You are intervening to do something to stop the behavior. So it's not always direct involvement.
Yeah.
And I'll say that there's another way too is to sit with the person that's being picked on, befriend that person, or like, reflecting on what Baird said in the film. It's like, get your friends to come alongside you. So power is in numbers. And so if you have enough people standing up to a behavior, and we always tell kids, don't stand up don't call that person out by name, but call out the behavior of what's actually happening. That's the bad thing that's happening there. And so we just want kids to know that there's just lots of different ways. And even if they're not comfortable in that moment, if they circle back with that person who was the victim of that abuse and say, hey, I saw what happened to you, and that is not right. And I'll help you go tell somebody, or come, let's talk about it. I mean, there's just so many other ways that kids can make a difference in a child's life who is the victim or the target of bullying.
I would hope that a kid could go to their parent and say, I don't know what to do with this. There's a situation on the bus where this kid is doing this behavior. Can you help me with that?
Yeah. There was a question here, and Jamie, you put in a great answer there, and I love that. But I'd also like to just call it out so we can have that conversation for everyone in case they didn't get to see it. But is there a difference between bullying behavior and racist discriminating behavior? If so, how so?
So the answer is yes, there is a difference. Racial discrimination, age discrimination, sex discrimination, those are all principles that are already covered heavily in federal law across all states. So a decision made in the Supreme Court in relation to discrimination will apply equally across the board in all jurisdictions. Whereas the law on bullying is generally a state law principle. And so there's going to be wrinkles in the application depending on the state that the incident is occurring in, but there'll still be ways to restrict and to punish. Now, there is going to be some cases where there's overlap, where somebody is being bullied by being told things that are specifically targeting that person's age, race, sexual affiliation, religion, things of that nature, which would cross over into a discriminatory act. There are instances where you might even commit a hate crime by some of the correspondence that you're sending, intending to harass somebody through, electronic communication. So a person can be charged with multiple offenses, both civil and criminally, depending on the content of their communication.
So I won't go too deep in it, but they feel like the same thing as far as like that feeling when you're walking around. Like for me, when I was little and I was severely bullied because I was Chinese.
Right.
Isn't that kind of racial discrimination and bullying?
Well, okay, let me take it back to a more granular level. Normally, when you're looking at discrimination, you're also looking at who is the party that's communicating the discrimination, right? So in a workplace, if we're talking about adults, that's one thing, and there's going to be federal jurisdiction will come into play based on whether or not commerce has been utilized, and in certain instances are more protected than others. But if you're talking about a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old who are exchanging communications that may invoke somebody's ethnic background, you're not going to get a federal charge there, no. Right? And so there's a lot of context to the parties involved, the type of communication, the place of communication. There's a lot of context that can be involved there. And honestly, if you really get a super intelligent lawyer who brings a brilliant argument, may or may not be successful, but one thing you might want to look at is if you can bring a parent into a federal claim based on their failure to supervise, based on the content that's being exchanged between the parties. It's a little outlandish. I haven't really put a lot of thought into it, but it's something to think about.
All right, thank you. We have another question here. For parents or children that are experiencing this now, I'm guessing that their child is being bullied, what's their first point of contact? Well, who's the first person they should call when their kid says, I'm being bullied?
I would say they would need to first of all sit down with their kid and try to come up with a solution and say, here are some options. We can go to the school, we can seek help, from an outside source like Dr. Jeff was just talking about. I mean, I think that there's ways to have a dialogue around it to make sure that your child feels empowered to help be part of the solution. And that's going to help develop that self-confidence that they're going to be able to get through this. And going to the school might be the first, if it's happening at school, that may be the first thing, but the child needs to be a part of that conversation and that decision.
I think it's important to not minimize what your child is telling you to. If a child is coming to you saying they're being bullied, not minimizing their experience by normalizing it, saying everybody's gone through that. I went through that as a kid. It's really important not to do that and to take them seriously.
Okay, so we're kind of getting short on time and I want to make sure we have time for wrap up, but there's a couple of ones that it seems like they're this similar question phrased in a different way, which makes perfect sense. What about when you get bullied by your friend or someone in your friend group that you have a relationship with, and then they turn on you and the bully's parents defend their own kids? What are you supposed to do? It happens.
Yeah. Do you have any ideas on that one?
I was just going to say like you said, it's very typical and it happens a lot in schools, especially, as things become more popular, as we evolve with pop culture, like these things happen more and more often because, we fall apart, like we grow apart as people and, kids don't always take that the best ways. But I would say, you know, just as Miss Maureen was saying before, like, even if it's your friend, you have to take those same steps, you know, because that person, even though they're close to you, they can be very dangerous to you. And so, like both Maureen and Stephanie were saying, I think it's very important that you include your child in that conversation, because it's easy for parents to get so riled up and be like, I don't want my child to be hurt. Like, we're going to do this, this, and that to solve the issue. And a lot of times your child may not feel like that's what's best for them. And so having those conversations is completely and utterly important. But I also think that being 100% as strong on your friend and 100% as strong as on a stranger is completely necessary as well. Because, you know, personally, I feel like if you're going to bully me as a friend, you've crossed the line from being a friend to being a bully. And that is a clear distinction.
Okay, last one, and then we're going to do our wrap ups. What should parents do if a kind child is being bullied in school and they simply don't like confrontation, nor do they want to get others in trouble? The child is loved and feels safe, but the bully is escalating. It started in 1st grade and it's continuing into 4th.
Sounds like an upstander is needed.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, you know, as a parent, you know your child better than anybody, and you have to weigh how they're feeling in a situation. And if they don't, you know, if they're not comfortable having attention brought to them in this type of a situation, it's just continuing to have dialogue with them and talking about the issue and making sure that they're okay, but also letting them know, you know, that what's happening, what that person is doing is not okay. That is not the way people should not be treated like that. And that person who is doing that may move on to somebody else who may not be as strong as their child. And so it's really important for us to try to teach our kids that these are tough conversations, and teaching courage in our kids is really hard. But just encouraging them to make sure that they use their voice and that they stand up and that they don't become a victim, because that can follow them for a long time throughout their lifetime.
Yeah.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
And I'll give probably an unpopular answer, but I think as a parent, my child doesn't yet know all the things that are best for them. They have their own feelings, but my child may wake up and say, I want ice cream for breakfast. And that doesn't mean I have to give it to them, right? And so if my child has been bullied for 3 years, I see a trend. Once is an occurrence, 3 years is a trend. I'll respect the fact that they don't want this to be a public confrontation, but there's going to be a conversation between myself, the administration, teacher, and the parent of the aggressor. That can be a private meeting that happens to address it and minimize the embarrassment that my child may feel. But I don't think that I would recommend, and I as a parent would not just allow that to continue if the conversations with my child have proven to be ineffective for 3 years.
I think we're talking about helping the kid be an upstander for themselves. And, you know, that's what I got from what the last 2 comments were saying.
Well, and I would just like to say and encourage parents to talk with their kids that the first time standing up for yourself or standing up for somebody else, it takes a lot of courage and it's very difficult. But each subsequent time is easier and easier the more you do it. And so, yes, it's very scary and overwhelming, but talking, you know, your child through this, the process of it and kind of being by their side through that, it's just going to be easier and easier the more they do it.
Just one more thing to add to that, and this is where the professional comes in when needed to help evaluate how rational the anxiety is on the part of the child. If it just seems like it's a little off the chart, maybe there's more going on there in terms of how realistic the child's capacity to assess the situation is.
I also think that there is an important message that parents can do and be vulnerable with their kids. So if they can actually talk and tell a story, their own story, I think that's one of the biggest messages. I think that was beautiful in the film was that wonderful woman who said, be open, say, don't say, I know what you're going through. I mean, never do that, because we all have our own individual experiences, but saying, you know what, I had this experience, and talk about your story and how bullying, whether you saw a friend or something like that, just find this relational piece. I think that's one of the biggest things right now when we're talking that way, because I think kids are embarrassed and they're ashamed that they're being bullied. But if you're able to tell your story, I think that gives them a whole other perspective. So that's just a piece that I think would be really important when you're having that conversation before you go to the next level, before you take action. Let them know that they are not alone, that they are heard, and that they are loved and wanted. I think that's one of the most important messages before we start on the next escalation of course, what has to happen.
Really quickly, I just wanted to potentially offer something. Something that I think can be very useful, especially when it comes to bullying, is encouraging your child to choose how they define themselves. Because a lot of times bullying is manipulation of your narrative. Someone is going to tell you this and that, and that's who you are. So by choosing to tell your child, hey, every single day you choose who you are. If that means that you are smart, if that means that you're beautiful, you know, this and that, like seeking affirmations is a great way to build their confidence and their courage. So when, you know, these events like inevitably happen, there is that backbone that they have back to follow. And like, this is not true. I know who I am.
Love that.
It's-
So Kennedy, what I was going to ask as the final wrap up is to ask each panelist to please share what one thing would you hope people would take away from this? And I don't know if you want that to be it or you want to add to it, and you can kick us off.
I definitely say that, but just to add something new, in the beginning of the film, the Upstanders, you know, there's the girl talking about how a 12-year-old girl climbed to the top of her water tower and jumped off. And that really resonated with me, because so often we categorize bullying as happening from one specific time period in your life. And so, you know, her being 12 years old is just utterly devastating. But we also have to realize that bullying happens across our lifespan. And so being cognizant of that and working to actively counteract these actions is something that we're going to have to do for the rest of our lives. It's not just while we're in school, but it's a habit that we have to have throughout our adulthood as well.
So true. Stephanie, would you like to go next?
Sure. There's a lot of things that I'd like people to take away. I'm going to use this to be personal, but I just, again, want to thank the MOLACs for using their experience to change the world. And I see that personally on a regular basis. So thank you for this, and thank you for this documentary. It's helping so many people.
Matt, you want to go next?
I can go next, sure. This is for the dads. I think that I just like to try to learn from our mistakes. People can learn from our mistakes. When I first heard this was going on with David, it was, you know, I was in the camp that it's not that big a deal. This is something that somebody's doing on a computer or whatever. Forget about it. Just turn it off. And I didn't see the damage that it was doing, and it took until losing David and learning more about the issue and how bad it is, and that it can affect kids worse than the physical bullying, that it is serious, and that it needs to be taken seriously, and you need to take the time to listen to your child and work through a solution. And if it's going on with your child, that they're at risk, and they need to be watched. They need your attention. They need your time.
Yep, 100%. Callie, would you like to?
Sure. I mean, there's so many lessons to be learned from this incredible documentary. But I think one of the things that we need to start to do is be self-compassionate and be good to ourselves in order to help others. I think we see, a lot of divisiveness in the world and what's going on. But if we learn how to be compassionate towards ourselves, we can teach our children, and we can teach the people around us. I know from my own personal experience that when I was tough on myself, when I continued to berate myself with the negative emotions, that all that does is spawn negative behavior, and things that continue to sort of go out of control, and I don't like myself. And I think that's what kids are getting these days. So let's learn to teach them about self-compassion and loving themselves first, and then we can get to the next level. So thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Jeff?
Yeah, thank you for letting me participate in this. This is a great cause, a great film. Really appreciate everything. I guess what my takeaway would be is that when you see changes in your kid that you don't understand and you feel out of your depth, don't hesitate to reach out. Think consultation, contact your local, your county psychological association, your community health authority, and just ask for someone who specializes in kids and families, and just go do some problem solving and get some help. You may learn something beyond this question that could be helpful.
And Jamie?
Sure, I'd say two things. First, learn technology because your children are learning it. They're born into it. It's important for you to know how to communicate with them. And so then when they're having an experience, you can identify and communicate better by understanding that, TikToks and the Snapchats and the things that are out there. And the second, I would say that if your child is a child that is not being bullied or a bully, to encourage them to be somebody who intervenes when they see something that's wrong. Having conversations about character and what's good, and helping them to be empowered to know that they can intervene when they see something that's not right, because intervention has a huge impact on the life of somebody who is going through a bad situation and feels that they're all alone.
Yeah, thank you. And Maureen?
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody again for being with us tonight. This is a community issue, and it takes everybody working together to address it. It is not a school problem. It is not a family problem. It is not a law enforcement problem. It is everybody's problem. And it is a public health crisis. And we have got to do more than what we're doing. And I feel, just that we've made great strides in Texas, and we're going to keep working on laws and strengthening our laws, teaching digital citizenship in our schools, suicide prevention. I mean, there's so many things that we can do that are so easy for us to get our hands on to help our kids to be able to navigate this time that they're living in. And I just want everybody to know that if there's anybody out there that has had a question or a concern that they did not get addressed, to please reach out to us at David's Legacy Foundation. Send us an email. I will personally get back to you. We can link you up with services and help and counselors, legal help. We'll do whatever we can to help you if you or your child is struggling. So we're here for you always. So thank you. Thanks, Sheila.
Oh, thank you so much. Everyone, you were incredible. I want to say also that Ian Andreen here, who's producing behind the scenes this event, is also one of the producers on David's Legacy. He also filmed it and edited. So I just wanted to give a shout out to him. And I guess my final sort of tip I would love for people to take away is that there's a lot of negativity in the world right now. And there's a lot of uncertainty, but there has always been uncertainty. And that, following kind of on what Tally was saying, is self-compassion and being kind to ourselves is really where we've got to start. If we connect with ourselves, if we are kind to ourselves, we are modeling for others how they can conduct themselves, how we want to be treated, and to find balance in life. Our phones are here to stay. Like, they're not going anywhere. We can have them, but let's use them as a tool to enhance the human condition, not to hurt each other. And I think that we can be better. We can use them as a tool to make us better. So thank you, everybody. I know that this panel and the film will be available in this dashboard with other materials from David's Legacy Foundation. And that will be sent out as soon as the panel is edited and encoded and popped in there. So everyone, thank you so much. This was our first time, I think, where we kind of did it big. And so it's David's birthday month, and it's the appropriate time to kick it all off. So thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for having this event.
Yes,
Oh, thank you so much. I loved meeting everybody.
It's remarkable. Thank you.
Thank you.